The Maori legend of a huge predatory bird, an eagle, which was around the same time as the moas. And Professor Richard Owen had proven that it also existed. Now, this was no ordinary eagle. This was the biggest eagle that's ever lived. In fact, it could stand probably as tall as a harpy eagle, which probably can stand just about 2 meters high, and that's the largest eagle alive today. But it also had very keen eyesight, a 3-meter wingspan, a beak the size of a butcher's cleaver, and talons as big as the claws of a tiger. Now, this animal is called harpagornis because the Greek word for grappling hook is harpax, and that's how this animal got its name, Harpagornis moray, or simply Bast eagle. And this was the biggest eagle that has ever lived. And it was New Zealand's apex predator, and it lived in the same habitat as the moas. Now, we know that Harpagornis preyed on moas because moa skeletons have been discovered with holes stabbed through their pelvic bones that exactly match the grip of the eagle's claws. And it might have even been strong enough to grip to a moa's back with one foot while it slashed at its victim's neck with the other foot. Or it might have even used its beak to disembowel the moas. But even so, this was New Zealand's top predator until the Maoris came along. And of course, the Maoris told legends of this bird alongside the moas, and of course the Maoris also said that Harpagornis could have been able to take a human being. I mean, that might not have been at all possible. It might have been an over-exaggeration, but even so, it might have been potentially possible. Of course, the Harpagornis was reliant on the giant moas in life and death. So when the Maoris came to New Zealand and completely exterminated the moas, the Harpagornis lost its main food supply and it too was doomed. This is where it's mostly found, where it was mostly found. I mean, it might have lived on the North Island as well. I mean, I'm not entirely sure. Next is Australia. Now, Australia is an island country that is legendary for its wildlife, particularly its reptiles and its venomous ones. But there were also animals in Australia that are not around today, and some of them were giants. And the first one I'm going to show you is an ancient relative of the Komodo dragon. It is Megalania, which was the biggest lizard that has ever lived. In fact, this was the ancient relative of the modern Komodo dragons. But unlike a Komodo dragon that can grow to be about just over 3 meters long, the Megalania would have grown to be 7 meters long, and this enormous creature had venom like its Komodo dragon descendants, which it used to bring down megafauna, giant mammals, and that included giant marsupials like the giant kangaroo, the giant wombats, and all the other large animals that inhabited Australia. Of course, but unfortunately, the Megalania went extinct when the Aboriginal people arrived in Australia, and of course they might have competed with the Megalania for food, but also they might have hunted this animal as a fear because I mean, when you think about it, this creature was about 4 times bigger than a modern day Komodo dragon, and it also could have brought down animals way bigger than anything today. Of course, I mean, we may never know how this giant lizard went extinct, but it is almost agreed upon by many scientists that when the Aboriginals arrived in Australia, many of the giant mammals, giant animals, including Megalania, died out. Of course, this is said to be their range. Of course, as you can see here, the climate was a lot less hot back then, so the sea levels would have receded a fair bit, and Australia would have been connected in a way to Papua New Guinea and southeast Indonesia. And the next animal I'm going to show you is another top predator from Australia. It is the Thylacoleo, which was a marsupial lion, a lion with a pouch, because marsupials are mammals that grow their young in a pouch on the mother's belly, and this was a marsupial lion, and of course it had a very unique looking thumb claw, because it looked like a pair of hands, and of course this was a great climber. It was arboreal, which means it spent a lot of its time in the trees, and scientists are quite sure that what the Thylacoleo did was it climbed up into a tree, and when prey, like a giant kangaroo, a giant wombat, or another large animal of Australia wandered underneath, the Thylacoleo would leap down and ambush them. But of course, this animal died out just before the Aboriginal people arrived in Australia. So it might have died out because of climate change or a natural disease breakout. But truth is, we may not know. But one thing is for sure, I'm quite glad this animal isn't around anymore, because although it was only small, it could probably have been capable of killing a fully grown man. Of course, that is where many of the Thylacoleo fossils are found. Now, the next animal of Australia that I'm going to show you that is now extinct, only went extinct about 90 years ago. It was the thylacine, or Tasmanian wolf. Now, this animal was a marsupial, so it grew its young in a pouch on its belly. And this was the biggest carnivorous marsupial that's ever lived. And it was found in Australia, and of course it lived alongside the Aboriginal people, but around about 200 years ago, European settlers arrived in Australia with livestock, guns, and other non-native species like rats, dogs, cats, foxes, badgers, and weasels, and pigs, and they decimated a lot of Australia's unique wildlife. Of course, the Tasmanian wolf was systematically hunted to extinction by European settlers. In fact, this was the last known animal that died in a zoo in Tasmania in 1936. And that marked another low in our relationship with the natural world. Of course, here is their range. Now I'm going to talk about the Ice Ages, and by that I don't mean the film franchise. I mean the periods of when our planet got very, very cold and then very, very warm, and so on and so forth. I'm going to start with probably the most famous animal from the Ice Ages, the woolly and Columbian mammoths. Now, mammoths are relatives of the elephants that are alive today, but of course there were, from what I know of, there were two distinctive species. There was the woolly mammoth and the Columbian mammoth. Now, these were a lot bigger than the modern day African elephants. In fact, a fully grown male could have stood about 5 meters tall at the shoulder, could have weighed about 10 to 12 tons, and had tusks of over 3 meters in length. And of course, it's quite possible that, like modern day elephants, mammoths would have lived in herds, while the females would have lived in herds. And of course, the males would have left usually at adolescence and would either have lived on their own or in loose bachelor herds like modern day elephants. Of course, these were some of the most widespread large mammals in the Northern Hemisphere throughout the Ice Ages, because during the Ice Age, the whole thing was why our planet got so cold was because a change in the Earth's orbit brought it a lot further away from the Sun, and that sent our planet on a roller coaster of different climates. And of course, the woolly mammoth were living fortresses against the cold. They had shorter ears and tails with their thick carpet of hair and a thick layer of fat called blubber under the surface of their skin, about 3 to 5 inches thick to keep them insulated. But the Columbian mammoth, which was the largest mammoth and the largest elephant ever to walk the earth, was a hairless species. And of course that lived in South America, but during the Ice Ages, because there was so much water frozen at the poles, so places like the North Sea and the English Channel were open grassland where mammoths and other animals of the Ice Age grazed, and even the peninsula that separates Russia from Alaska was open grassland, so you could have walked to North America from Russia like that. But although these animals were sort of formidable at looking after themselves and their family, they weren't completely invulnerable against humans when we came along. But of course, no one's entirely sure about how the mammoths went extinct. I mean, some paleontologists say it was climate change at the end of the Ice Age, where the world warmed, the ice retreated, and their habitat disappeared. Other people say it was overhunting by early humans, like Homo sapiens, because we more than likely hunted the mammoths for their meat, their fur, their tusks, and their bones. And we may have overhunted these animals, and the most horrifying part is that we didn't know any better. But of course, I think it might have been a combination of both that drove these two magnificent beasts to extinction. As I said, this was the world during the Ice Age. Of course, around here there was, in fact, because there was no sea around here, so you could walk from Alaska to Russia. And of course, Britain wasn't cut off from the rest of the world, because the North Sea and the English Channel were open grassland. But that all changed when the world warmed. Now I'm going to show you all another species of mammoth that was only discovered in the 1990s. They are the pygmy mammoths. Now, pygmy mammoths were only discovered in the 1990s. In fact, they were discovered on the Channel Islands of California, and it's actually believed been shown that these were a stranded species of Columbian mammoth that somehow got to